From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, show about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure, life itself. I'm Ken Napzok.
I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
I'm Jennifer Landa.
And we are here for the NPR of Star Wars. We're going to be diving into some Star Wars questions today. We have some fun ones from you out there. As always, we want to remind you that today's broadcast is brought to you by Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. We are recommending Rebel Rising by Beth Revis, one of our favorite Star Wars books out there. And yeah, it was under the category of YA. Do not stop at that sign and not enter, because it's a wonderful, wonderful book. Download your free audiobook today and go to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audio book. That's 1A. Joseph, the bar is really low for quality reads today with me. So what's our ask?
Our ask is 450 450 paid patrons. 415 paid patrons. We are very grateful for the support on patreon.com. It is the real structural integrity of keeping ForceCenter going. Everything else is great, but Patreon is what keeps this channel, this podcast going. We keep bouncing up and around 400 patrons, and we're trying to do a big push to get to 415. When we reach 415, we're going to do a Patreon-only live stream of some fun kind to be determined. So that is it for the asks. But we should also plug the live stream we got coming up this Friday.
We should, right here on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, we'll be going live at 2 p.m. Pacific. This episode, we're recording at the beginning of the week, so we haven't discovered the topic yet in our soul, what we'll be doing. So it's one of those weeks. It's all, come on, it was like 111 the other day. It was 114 at the Burbank airport the other day. We're still recovering. But yeah, going to be a fun live stream. Questions, calls, all from you out there in our ForceCenter audience. So subscribe here on the YouTube channel so you won't miss it.
Yeah, it's like 100 degrees as we record. But in the future, when people watch this, it'll only be like 90 degrees in Los Angeles. Yeah. So beautiful. So beautiful the future is. Well, we're going to get right into our questions then. We have two great questions that came to us from some patrons on Patreon. The first one comes to us from Douglas Dubois, and it's a thing that we have discussed before, but Douglas has a real specific take on it, and I don't think we've heard Jennifer's opinion as much on this one. So here's what Douglas has to say. Will Star Wars ever try adapting a story from page to live screen? Yes, we've had this in snippets in animation, like Master Balaba's End in the beginning of Bad Batch. But could they make a live-action movie out of a beloved novel? A series out of the High Republic Publishing Initiative? Not just cherry-picking characters and ideas or taking a beat or two to include in a wider story, but actually taking a narrative along with its characters and being okay that some comic book readers already know how it will go. I hope so, says Douglas, because there are a lot of great stories to mine. It works for many book adaptations. Why not Star Wars? This is a great question, and I really like the way Douglas was approaching this, that like maybe Star Wars has now been around for so long and has built up such a library that the same way, you know, a production company comes along and says, we're going to do an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. Could Star Wars come along and go, you know what? We're going to do an adaptation of Splinter of the Mind's Eye and truly adapt their own novels. This is also, I think, you know, a common refrain among fans of the EU or Legends that there's a lot of great material to be adapted there. So, Jennifer, what's your starting place with this idea of adapting Star Wars novels to live action?
I think it's a fun idea. I immediately go to what world or genre can Star Wars explore? Horror is my vote, even though I'm not really a big horror fan. But like, you know, Red Harvest, Death Troopers, which I've mentioned many times here. And then I started thinking about something that one of our listeners mentioned, which is the Screaming Citadel. Do you remember that comic run?
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Right? I know it's really out there, Ken. I'm judging from your reaction.
I do. I remember it, Jen.
Yeah.
I remember.
But
Ken and I have different opinions on space vampires.
I think it's fun. And this is why this is never going to happen. This is like my my wish. I mean, Black Chrysanthemum is there. You have the Evil Queen, Witch, Force Sensitive. What was it? Force Vampires? I don't remember. It's been so long since I read it. Dr. Aphra. I would love to see Dr. Aphra on the live screen, the big screen, some screen. But yeah, I think that could be very, very fun, very stylized, especially if you pair it with the right director, right writer. I don't know. I'm open. I'm open to anything Star Wars wants to give us, and I don't have any expectations.
Ken, what's your reaction to the idea of bringing things to live action?
I've always been a fan of the idea. I think the most popular answer, if we were playing that game show of Survey Says, ding, it would be Lost Stars, right? Claudia Gray's first swing to the Star Wars world way back when. I think that would be an interesting take. We've always loved her Princess of Alderaan book, Leia, Princess of Alderaan. I think that could work as well. I still think animation's the best spot to do it, especially with some casting choices. If it's a book set in original trilogy era with some of the more classic characters, we don't cross that complicated bridge of recasting versus de-aging, all those kind of things. But even then, I think the possibility exists. Now, that's been my answer over the last few years. I have to admit, Joseph, there's a slight wrinkle and change. A little grumpy Ken slides in here.
All right.
We saw the Depa Billaba change, which is her and young Kanan and the Order 66 of it all. We saw it redone in the Bad Batch. There's some bigger issues around some of the Ahsoka stuff with that Tales of the Jedi version that we discussed here before too. Look that up. But putting that stuff aside, and important conversations of changing characters and representation issues and that stuff, I'm putting that on a shelf. That's important and not part of what I'm saying now. I have become very grumpy of just the lack of understanding and maybe even empathy for creators when it comes to adaptations. This comes from years in the Game of Thrones world, now House of Dragon, also Rings of Power, show I love. Also Jackson Lord of the Rings fan. There's still an old friend of my life who's like, never seen those Jackson movies, complete shite. Like, he's a Tolkien lore head who reads the books every year, and God bless him. But they are two separate things. They're not the same. And I think if you were to take Lost Stars, a beloved book, if you were to take High Republic, Light of the Jedi, I remember reading that and going, this is a treatment for a movie. So let's say you do that. I'd love that. But you'd have to make changes. You have to. This isn't about whether you like Game of Thrones Season 8. This isn't about whether you like Rings of Power. It is just there's so many things that are like, well, in the book. And I think once you say, well, in the book, done. We're not having the same conversation anymore. This is an adaptation. It has to change. Things have to change. Even a book like High Fidelity to the movie. The book about a boy is different than the movie. I'm going back 20 plus years with movie references here, I know. They have to be different. It's the nature of it. And I just don't think I'm ready for the battle that would happen if we went with that right now. And that's, over the last couple of years, I just finally had my fill of it.
You know what? I am ready for that battle. I am tired of having that be a concern. I think you're correct that it is a concern, but maybe this is a good way to rip the giant Band-Aid off, because I think this is something where they would be straightforward adaptations. I totally get the spirit in the fun of Lucasfilm announcing early on in the Disney Lucasfilm era that it's all going to be connected, and I think we have benefited from that. The way Saw Gerrera, his whole story traces through animated shows to books to comics to TV shows to movies. Like, it's beautiful. I remember reading Rebel Rising and just from a character description, Saw Gerrera did this thing to this relatively obscure prequels character. Like, there are rewards to be had from connected canon. But as we've talked about before, all of Star Wars operates under this unreliable narrator. These are stories from long ago, and there's absolutely no reason that you couldn't say Lost Stars exists as a book, and here is the adaptation of Lost Stars, and maybe a couple details change, and just have people really get comfortable with the idea that a connected canon means that it's not going to suddenly be that, Han and Luke actually met on Mapuzo. They didn't meet on Tatooine. Like, we're not going to change massive things.
Right.
The way all events happened, the exact way they happened are different. Like Cobb Vanth has the same origin story. The details are different.
Great.
And I think that there's a lot of, confusion about what element are people concerned about. Is it something really legitimate, like a representation issue that's not really about story? Or is it, I read it in this comic book and I need it to happen exactly as in this comic book? That part is like, hey, if you loved a story, don't you want to hear two versions of it? Because the worst that'll happen, you'll go, I didn't like that interpretation of Lost Stars. I'm going to go reread the book. Every time I watch any adaptation of it makes me just want to, reread the parts of the book I like. Maybe a weird example, because that's a weird book. Anyway, point being, I just think that there's some things like, yes, that would get some elements of the fan community up in arms, but I feel like it's a gift to have multiple versions of a story that you like, and it's not just a negative that things will have to change. It's fascinating to take something like a book that can be so very internal and say, how do you express that externally? How do we get that depth of feeling from these characters that we get by being inside their head? How do we translate that to their actions? How do we translate that to the way the shot is framed? That's a gift, not a problem.
No, I agree with everything you're saying there. So I will stand behind you on the front lines and just go, yeah.
I'll take the adaptation hits.
You could take it, because I'm with Ken. Actually, I'm like, let's not go down this road, because I don't want to hear it. I don't want in the book in chapter 1. I'm like, oh, please be quiet. Here's an idea. What about Iden Versio, and you have Janina Gavankar reprise her role? I think a video game adaptation, and it was also a book as well, right? It was a book.
There was a prequel book with the character. It wasn't. It was a setup for the video.
Okay.
Video game adaptation. Look at The Last of Us. I found it to be a success, and I played the video game as well. I think Iden Versio, that'd be foolproof. Everyone would love it, right, guys? Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot of people would.
Iden's one of my favorite characters. Yeah.
Right? I think maybe that's the way to go, as opposed to a book where people can point to the text and be like, this is actually what they said. No, this is a character that you've played and whatever, but we can kind of have a little bit more room to play. I think that's already the problem that we have with canon in general with Star Wars, is we're kind of locked in to even where Ki-Adi-Mundi's age, it causes such a kerfuffle. It's like, oh my goodness, that's a lot to keep track of. So let's just have a little bit more room to play in this sandbox. Iden Versio is my vote.
It's a good vote. And yeah, I think it's going to, I think there's going to be some even more things coming up in Andor that are probably going to tweak other things, and I just think it will be healthy for people to enjoy the parts of Star Wars being all interconnected that they can, and then enjoy the flexibility of, we're going to have slightly different adaptations of stories. Go ahead, Ken.
No, like I said, I'm owning my grumpiness on it, and it's more about other properties here, but it's bled into Star Wars too. But it's even George R. R. Martin, and a now blog post that he took down, criticized some of the decisions in House of the Dragon, and you could look at, all right, he had an agreement with Condal, and he feels Ryan Condal went back on it. I just, he has this, you change one thing, it's a butterfly effect. Yeah, I'm sure the show was aware of that. And they're going to find the reason your character dies in the story, in the page, could be different than the reason in the show. Just let them figure that out. Let them get there. And that's where I just kind of, I'm up against, we're not, like I said, we're not changing the details of where Luke and Han come from. But they did change the details of Cassian Andor. 100% changed it. Now, they did it in, I thought, an interesting way. Of going, in the Star Wars guides, he was born here with these parents, but it's something different, and here's what it means to our story and how we're going to play with it, and that's interesting to me as well. But so I'm all for the choices. I'm all for the stories. Yeah, I think maybe 11 years in, I've got exhausted of the conversation, which is why Jen and I are going to be right behind you. We'll be right behind you.
Cut to me being peppered with blaster bolts and falling and.
You'll be our Jon Snow.
Yeah. You don't have to try to bring me back. That's fine. Like Jon Snow. Just let me go. I do. Here's the thing where I love the dream of adapting to live action, but I actually do think that the live action part of it, like that would be cool, and I would like to see that. But I do get hung up on the realism of that. I do kind of feel like, Star Wars started out as a cinematic live action story, and I'm excited about people continuing to create new cinematic stories. There's also just like it does go to the weeds on a thing that I don't want to deal with, and I'll have to stand behind one of you two on this one of the recasting of the like.
Yeah.
I mean, well, we're going to deal with it eventually with Filoni's film anyway. Anyway, point being, for me, a lot of the novels I really like and would really love to see adapted involve a lot of legacy characters, right, and then you get into stuff with live action there. I would love, and I think would actually, maybe it's happening. I think would be a great move for Disney Plus. I think Disney Plus needs to continue to put some fresh Star Wars on the streaming service. I think things are very confused about what should be a live action television show. The movie slate is already backed up to 2038. So I think an amazing thing to do would be animated films, and you could make them big events to the level that they should be, of limited weekend theatrical release. Here's the film adaptation of Vader Year One by Charles Soule, adapted into a live action animated thing. You can make some money on it first weekend, and then it's a new thing on Disney Plus. And I think that there's a model for it. DC has been pumping out animated adaptations of beloved comic book runs for years and years and years. And it's the comic book world, so it's different. They are absolutely adaptations. They added a thing to a famous Batman story called Killing Joke, which was already controversial. And then they added a second entirely deeply controversial thing because they're adaptations. And I just think it would be a win on many levels to pick a beloved story and give it bigger exposure by adapting it in an animated form in particular. Ken, how do you feel about animation adaptations?
Absolutely. I want to see, not only do I want to see a new series announced eventually, I want to see an animated movie. I want to see things. I love the Tales of the Jedi and Tales of Empire stuff is some of my favorite Star Wars content in the last couple of years. I'm sorry I used that C word, storytelling. It's some of my favorite Filoni stuff. Where I think he had a swung and miss at little moments in Ahsoka, a series I know people love, but I don't think he missed in those series as much for what he was getting. I think it's some of my favorite stuff. So I would love to see more of that. And Bad Batch remains probably overall my favorite Star Wars storytelling in the last few years. So I think it's right for that. And it would be just the good spot for one of these adaptations. I don't know why, and that doesn't mean I'm speaking less of animation fans or the animation medium. Quite the opposite. But it just seems like it would be a little less jarring. Maybe. Could be wrong.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
I think it's because animation by its nature is adaptation. When the Clone Wars came out and people loved it, they weren't like, that's not what Dooku's head is like. We've had a little bit of the opposite way where animated characters come into live action and people are concerned about head size. But by definition, animation is a little bit of a visual adaptation. Yeah. So I kind of feel like that would give it a little bit more of a sense of this is a way to look at this story. Jennifer, any thoughts on animation adaptation?
Yeah. So if we're like three executives right now, I think what you guys are pitching is right on the money. I'm thinking like Studio Ghibli, but Star Wars. And we saw some of that with Star Wars Visions. Certainly Bad Batch was so sophisticated in its storytelling. It just proves that like animation is a great vehicle to tell these stories, and people, like you're saying, kind of buy into these wild leaps a little bit more. I don't think that they're stuck on the canon per se. I just think that there's just so much more room to tell, I don't know, take risks in animation. And I would love it to be like an event like these Studio Ghibli films are, right? It can be in the movie theater. It can be on Disney Plus. And I think that, I just really get excited thinking about that. We could have some really fun characters and stories. So make it happen, Lucasfilm.
Yeah, I mean, so many great Dr. Aphra stories. You could do wild things if you got people used to it. You could do the Phasma novel. which is just wild. I would love to see that Rise of Kylo Ren comic book by Charles Soule. All sorts of great. And then I think you could cross into do you want to do EU? And it's just an adaptation of an existing story, especially the ones that are one-off, like Death Troopers. Like, here's something really different for Halloween, or I really like that John Jackson Miller Kenobi book. And I think if they were in animated form and they were a little bit more like, hey, you know how DC does adaptations? Here's some adaptations. That could be beautiful. Any final thoughts, Ken?
No. I don't want to. I can't back off of my grumpiness because it's driving me crazy in the other things I watch and love. But with Star Wars fandom already sometimes being up in arms over a lot of things, I get it. But it wouldn't stop me if I'm an executive. I'm not. I don't. I got rid of all my suits. I wouldn't let that stop me. Let's find a way to tell these stories.
Oh, I do have one last question for you, Ken. Sorry. The High Republic of it all. So the High Republic is beloved. Those stories are amazing. I think individual novels in the High Republic, particularly Phase 1, they're absolutely a complete story, beginning, middle, and end. But they're also so interlaced. So you could do a version of the High Republic where you adapt Light of the Jedi and you adapt Into the Dark. Or you could do kind of a radical version where you're like, well, Avar Kriss jumps around from books to comics to this. So what if we just told her story? Like, you could approach the High Republic lots of different ways. How do you feel about adaptations of the High Republic, of the existing stories?
I would like it because maybe I could finally catch up, right? Because I miss reading those series, and that's on me, not on the books. I fell behind it all. Love it. Again, Light of the Jedi is, I think, still my number one Star Wars novel I've read going back to 2014. I love it. So I think that'd be interesting. You absolutely would run into some stuff I'm complaining about, but that shouldn't stop it. And again, I do not believe they started the High Republic to get to another medium. I do believe it was a publishing initiative from the beginning, and that was the intentions. But and again, Acolyte comes along, but as we know, that was famously pitched independently and then just kind of synced up with the air. Synced. You know what I mean? Connected with the era that already existed. I would like to. I'd like to see something else in the High Republic because it's such a deep, wonderful section of the Star Wars story right now.
Yeah. Jennifer, I know you haven't had a chance to really dive into the High Republic, but any thoughts on those things being adapted?
No, I'm just obsessing now over Star Wars Studio Ghibli. I never know how to pronounce that. I just think that, like, I think of the what was it, the Ahsoka Tales of the Jedi, like how beautiful some of those shots were in those episodes. Oh my gosh, like you just want to frame it and put it on your wall. Oh, I just see so many possibilities. Disney is obviously known for their animated films. I just think that that's really kind of that's the future of Star Wars. I really, really think so. Back off on the live action shows on Disney Plus and just make them big animated events. Oh, I think that'd be
really cool.
Hugely successful.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry. This is my last one more question. Jennifer, how would you feel about the opposite, where they looked at the success of the animated Bad Batch and made a live action Bad Batch?
I think it'd be terrible. Terrible. I mean, part of what makes that show are the voice. I mean, like,
sorry, I'm laughing at Ken's face.
Right, Dee Bradley Baker and forgive me, Michelle. Oh, I can't remember who plays
Michelle Ang.
Michelle Ang.
Yes, thank you. Omega. Gosh.
Yeah.
Their performances for me make that show. So I don't know how my expectations would be unrealistic. And I'd be the angry fan.
Yeah.
Here's my live action Bad Batch sucks. So that would be me. And I'd get millions of views and make millions of dollars.
Ken, any thoughts to go along with your faces? The horror I've suggested.
It's a wonderfully performed show with the voice cast that is, as we know, smaller. I think you would run into some challenges with the performances in a live action version is all I'll say.
Yeah.
Very diplomatic.
It just amuses me because it feels like such an 80s choice that would have been made of, like, they're popular in the cartoon, so now on the big screen, live action. Wrecker smashing stuff. Anyway,
G.I. Joe,
I'm
that
not
didn't turn out
advocating
too
for
well.
that. I was just
Dolph Lundgren has Wrecker. Yeah.
Rick Moranis is tech. Yeah, it would be not good. It's not a good idea.
Not good.
No.
It's not a good idea at all. I shame myself for even bringing it up. Because I said such a bad thing, we have to take a break now. We'll be back in a moment. And we are back to hopefully recover from the idea of 80s live action Bad Batch to the best of our abilities. We have another question here from patron on Patreon, Joshua Bernard, which this is a really fun one. He says, hello, Ken, Jennifer, and Joseph. Besides the Millennium Falcon, do you think we would ever see another YT-1300 in a live-action movie or show? I think it might confuse general audiences and even the casual Star Wars fans because people would just assume it was the Falcon. Since this is the hero ship, I understand it needs to be easily recognizable to the audience. It would make more sense to have a ship that would go unnoticed, like a modified Imperial shuttle. If you want to be sneaky, it is easier to use a Honda Civic or Ford F-150, not a flashy Lamborghini or Ferrari. We had a car question last week as well, so this is just our car talk era of ForceCenter. But Jennifer, how do you feel about seeing more YT-1300s? How do you deal with that when the Falcon is such an icon?
This is where I'm going to be grumpy, and I'm going to say, no, there's only one. Don't do it. This is where, like, Star Killer Base, and people were like, you're just rehashing what was done before. And I don't know. I just let it be the beautiful hamburger that it is. I just can't imagine. Again, expectations, and it's just so special. And like, people have wonderful imaginations. Let's create something new. We don't have to always go. Although I don't know, I go back and forth. Whatever.
How much is your opinion on this affected by Dash Rendar's Outrider, which is clearly not the same model, but jumping off of it, right? It's like they use elements of the Falcon to kind of connect him to Corellian bad boy history.
I know, and he's kind of like a knockoff of Han Solo, so it's like
kind of,
yeah, right, exactly.
You know what Han Solo was missing? Shoulder pads. That's what the 90s said.
Dash Rendar. There's a name I have not thought about for a long time. Yeah, I don't know. The vehicle thing is really a weak spot for me, where I'm just like, I don't know, if maybe you might make me think twice. But I think about like people getting confused, the casual fans, even young kids not being able to tell the difference. I don't know. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. Ken, where do you begin with this question?
I understand that this is a model, just like I had a Ford Fairmont and you had a Ford Fairmont. I think we could have run into each other on the road in another life, Joseph, and did the Spider-Man pointing meme. I think you could play it for comic effect. I think it could be done that way. I was going to go to Dash Rendar, even though I know he had a different version. I know the Ghost is a different version of the same kind of models and everything. I get that. But I think it's just become so iconic. It's like look at Lando at the end of Empire suddenly wearing Han's vest or a vest like it. It's probably just a style at the time, but what is that? So it would just seem weird, out of place, and you have this legendary ship. I mean, look at the problem going into Solo: A Star Wars Story, where Lando had his own version of the same ship, and that was rejected. Like that, the same ship with just a escape pod in the front. Like people are like, no, that's not the Falcon I know. Like it's so. I think if you got two competing Falcons, but I think you could. Going back to animation, I want to see the 15-minute animation story where Han like parks and he comes out and there's a YT-1300 right next to the Falcon, and he's got like, what is? Only I got that ship.
I've certainly been in a parking lot trying to open somebody else's Toyota Yaris. These things happen.
I was trying to load golf clubs into a car that was not Mark Ellis's, and he couldn't figure out why. For 2 minutes, I was like, "What? Are you going to open the door?" He's like, "My car's over there." Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, the Falcon is like the Prius in space.
Yeah. That's what's most fascinating to me about it is when these things come up in Star Wars, the tension between the fantastic and the realistic. I mean, we've talked about this before in terms of like the original trilogy, where there were hints at kind of like the grounded in the deep, but you didn't wonder too much about like, hey, does Han Solo pay taxes? Whereas as Star Wars goes on, we get more and more like we have refreshers, for bathrooms, they have government agencies, and we get into the weeds of it in the comics and the books. There's all sorts of stuff about how much the holo novels affect people, that there's a whole world of pop culture within Star Wars that are causing people to dream or get angry, or like all of this very real one-to-one world stuff happens in Star Wars. But there are still moments that are that we really cling to of like, no, it's fantastic. And that's great tension, that the fantasy is that, that's the one and only, that's the Falcon. And we accept the in-world reality that it's a PT Cruiser, and there are other of them, but we do not ever for even one damn second want to feel the realism that the Falcon is a PT Cruiser. Do not do that to us. That tension between when we still want to cling to fantasy versus no. Lots of gritty details and lots of stuff that's one-to-one to the real world is fascinating to me. Ken, how do you feel about that tension when it comes to the Falcon? Of like those are both parts of the story, that the Falcon's kind of unique. It's one and only. It is the ship that made the Kessel Run. Hans and Chewie have made special modifications, but he could bump into another one parked outside of Maz's castle. How do you deal with that tension of those two things both being a part of the story?
I think you could use it in a good way to have Han affirm that he is the greatest. That Han is like, yeah, that you might have a YT 1300, but I make this, and Chewie, by the way, we make this special. Otherwise, it would be a hunk of junk. Yours is a hunk of junk. Mine is the finest ship in the galaxy, and it being a building block to more hubris inside the character of Han Solo. I mean, the character that Han plays in his own head. I think that'd be kind of fun, because it would be the real world of Star Wars running up against Han, right? Like, because he goes around thinking this is it. This is the only one. He didn't think I like Lando's PT Cruiser. I'm going to go buy my own. He thought, I'm taking his PT Cruiser.
I'm ripping the paneling off and making it my own, putting in a different engine. Yeah. Jennifer, how do you feel about that tension? Those are both parts of the Star Wars story, that the Falcon is unique, and that this is, a well-respected model made by craftspeople on Corellia. It's part of the kind of pride of Corellia that these great ships used to be made there.
I think that real world rules don't always apply to Star Wars. Look at a lot of the physics, as I'm learning about. So it's like when I see a different Ithorian, it's like, oh, there's another Ithorian, like, or Black Chrysanthemum. Oh, there's another Wookiee. But with this, it's too iconic. There can only be one. I can believe that there are multiple in the galaxy, but if you're going to show it, then there's got to be a storyline around it. I don't think that you can just have it in the background. It would be very jarring and like, what is that? Right. So, there is only one that I want to see on screen.
Yeah, I really agree with Joshua's point there that you're bringing us back to, Jennifer, of this idea of another YT 1300 just being in the background in a live action movie. Like Rey just, flies past, another ship that she's landing the Falcon on. And if she's still using the Falcon in the new Jedi Order film, and there are two others parked there, like, is a background thing, that would be really confusing. I think the part of the story that I like of it being a model that the story could have been, those got recalled and they all got trashed. They weren't well made, except for this one, right? The story, especially in Solo, like my dad used to build these. There's something that kind of ties back to, early automotive history, I think, in the real world of, people made these back when they were supposed to be quality, and our entire community and our culture depended on them. And, just like, places in America where steel towns, Corellia was a ship planet, and the pride of the line was the YT 1300. I really like that part of the story because that isn't boring. That's romantic. So I wouldn't mind. I don't want one flying around in the background, but I wouldn't mind if they found a way to make that history a part of the story. So my pitch would be in something live action, animated, whatever. Maybe I'd rather see it than have it be described. That, there's still a few YT 1300s banging around the galaxy. they're all souped up to look really, really different. So none of them look like the Falcon. They all look as different as Lando's, or even more different with different things added. And Han goes to basically a retro car show, like you can go to at lots of places in
Bob's
the real
Big
world.
Boy on a Friday night
Right?
in
You can
Burbank.
go Bob's Big Boy, and you see all these cars. I would love for Han to go to like a YT13 parade and just see kind of all these old timers with their YT1300s kitted out in entirely different ways. So there's no confusion about why it is. You just get to see all the different ones on parade. That would be the way I'd be okay with it.
Star Wars car show. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Ken, how do you feel about you like that?
Yeah.
All right. Jennifer,
I like it. I like it. And you highlighted one of my favorite little moments in Solo Star Wars Story, a movie that I just love deeply. It's those little things. It is Corellia and its industry being oppressed by the Empire, which destroys the people on the ground and creates the need to survive and the need to take on a persona to get through it all. But Han connecting it back to that and not loving his father necessarily, having clearly some disagreements, fallouts, and some problems there, but connecting it back to a more golden age. And so to have the ship kind of represent that on a deeper level with him and have it play out, but also connecting to the larger, like, seeing what you're talking about of it was the pride. It was the pride of the Corellian shipping yards, the YT-1300. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I didn't even think of like a flashback to like ancient times, not ancient times, but at a time when Han's dad was making these. I don't want to meet Han's dad, but if it was set in the right time period and you just had a cutaway shot of them pumping out of the line, and they wouldn't look like the Falcon because it'd be clean, Interesting. Jennifer, you seem uncertain about anything with multiple YT-1300s. What are your thoughts?
I don't like it. I'm sorry. It doesn't feel like I totally understand, but like my heart just wants it to be totally original. I just prefer it to be original. It's like with Jyn Erso. I remember I had multiple people who were like, wait, that's not Rey? That's not the same person. Like
I had that in the theater. The lady next to me at the press screening.
Right. Like
this is the girl last year, right? This is a continuation of her story. I went, oh no. Oh no.
So there can only be one Falcon, please, so we don't get confused.
Well, I suspect that you are deeply not alone, probably in the majority. I hope some people are entertained by car show, my YT-1300 parade idea, but I suspect far more people agree with you, Jennifer, that nope, the Falcon's the one, the only. It's fine to know they're out there, but we don't need to see it. So maybe I'll in my copious free time, I'll work on some fan art of the Han Solo at the car show, at the YT-1300 car show. Any final thoughts on this question, Ken?
No, I love it. It's something I think I haven't thought about, but that has always been there. Like, what would it be like for Han to see that? Even the little cameo in Revenge of the Sith, right? I've seen it. Like, well, is that the Falcon? Wow, that's fantastic. Or is it another ship? I wanted it to be the Falcon and not another version of it there. So yeah, it's a legendary ship for a reason. There's a reason that ship got an applause break on the first viewing of Force Awakens I saw.
Oh yes, I think every time I saw the Force Awakens. Jennifer, we'll close with you. What Ken and I have rambled about our Ford Fairmonts and all that being Falcon like. What does the Falcon mean to you? Why do you love it?
It's a hunk of junk, but she's got it where it counts. I don't know. It just is like something old can still have value, right? And that to me is what I appreciated about it. Is that it doesn't have to be slick or sleek or the newest thing. This old hunk of junk can still make magic happen, both in Galaxy and for us as well.
Perfect last words. Ken, any final thoughts from you, or do you want to take us home?
I want to take us home, but Jen, what was your first car? I'm going to guess a Volkswagen Golf.
Oh, you're so close. A Volkswagen. Wait, no. That was my second car. The first one was Acura Integra. That was my first.
And
one.
then what? Did you have a Jetta? Did you have a Volkswagen Jetta?
I had a Beetle.
That's good. No, that's good.
Volkswagen Beetle. Remember that redesign that they had?
I do.
Terrible car.
That's perfect. That's perfect. That's better. The Jetta was very popular in the early 90s too.
I wanted one. Yeah.
Love it. All right. Asked and answered. Thanks, Jen. And thanks for all the questions, everybody, today. Hey, we're ForceCenter. You can find us on social media at ForceCenter Pod. We are also on Facebook at ForceCenter Podcast, Instagram, YouTube as well. Subscribe here. We've got a live stream Friday, which by the time this airs will be tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pacific. We are available as a podcast in a lot of spots. Just search and find us. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter. And down below, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see links for our Fourth Wall shop. We're going to be adding things there shortly. Patreon.com/ForceCenter is where you can support us directly. Follow me at Ken Napzok or go to my website, kennapzok.com for more. Jen, where can they find you and Tales of a Volkswagen Beetle?
Oh my goodness. You can find me on most of the social media sites at Jennifer Landa or TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138.
Joseph, where can they find your short story on Han Solo and the car show?
Maybe it'll be a children's picture book. I think that's the right way to do it. Anyway, you can find me on all the social media at Joseph Scrimshaw, and you can visit my website, josephscrimshaw.com, for updates on all the film stuff I'm doing. Also, do a quick plug as we're getting closer and closer to election happening to vote forward. If you want to write letters to just encourage people to go vote, use their power, you can find out more about doing it on their website, votefwd.org. That is it for me, Ken.
That is it. We'll see you all next time here on ForceCenter.